Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar. Please wait for a short time, a few seconds, so that we can start with a few additional people. And thank you in advance for your patience. So hi again, and thank you for joining this webinar with Checkpoint and Zinnia. My name is Jonathan Moreski. I'm a product marketing manager in Checkpoint's cloud security team. I'm happy to kick off this webinar about what CISOs need to consider in their cloud migration. So some housekeeping first. Please use the Q&A panel to ask your questions at any time. Hopefully we'll have lots of time to answer at the end of the webinar, and please let us know during the Q&A or in the Q&A panel if there are any topics or questions that you'd like our experts to cover, because this is quite an informal conversation. Another thing is that we have added a bunch of attachments that you can look at during the webinar. And we also have 2 polls, and we welcome you to participate. So now I'd like you to meet our expert speakers. Saul Schwartz is Information Security Manager at Zinnia, formerly known as SE2. And thank you for your partnership in this webinar and in general, Saul. And TJ Gonen is VP of Cloud Security at Checkpoint. And they'll be speaking a lot in the future, so they will be able to introduce themselves. So in terms of a very brief agenda, firstly, TJ will set the stage for the discussion with some background and context, more about cloud security and migrations and customer stories. Saul will tell us a little bit about Zinnia and share some of Zinnia's cloud migration story. And the bulk of the webinar will be interactive. And at the risk of repeating myself, you're welcome to send your questions or your topics for conversation. And we'll have some time at the end for next steps and Q&A. So let's kick off our first poll. And actually, this first one has a lot of space for audience participation. So hopefully you can see that. The questions are, what do you most want to learn from this webinar? Answer number 1 is the difference between a cloud vendor security and a cloud security vendor, like Checkpoint. Answer 2 is, what are the top 3 crucial things in your checklist for cloud security or cloud migration security? Answer 3 is the most painful lesson that you learned in your cloud migration journey, and these are the questions that TJ and Saul are going to be talking about. So please feel free to vote about the stuff that you want to know about. And if you have any questions that you'd like to add and you want to be voted on, please add them into the Q&A, audience question 1, audience question 2. And there's already a question in the audience. Is the majority of industry still moving to the cloud? So we'll be able to talk about that in Q&A. If you have any questions that you'd like to add into this poll, please tell us. But in the meantime, please feel free to vote on what do you most want to learn from this webinar. And if you have any additional suggestions, please add them into the Q&A. So we have some votes already. The difference between cloud vendor security and a cloud security vendor. So far, that's leading. And let's see what else. And I need to leave this on. So I'll leave this up so you can continue voting. But we will jump directly into the next section. TJ is going to be setting the stage. So TJ, take it away.
Yeah. By the way, I don't know what the answer is. Cloud vendor security. That's a good one. Let's maybe I'll listen to it later. So hey everyone, TJ, thanks for joining us, and I'm very happy to have this. And like Jonathan said, we're going to spend most of the time talking because I think that's really the interesting part around this conversation here. Every time we start a webinar and the term cloud security comes up, it's just amazing to me that I've been in cloud security for 10 years. And when it started 10 years ago, it was, hey, EC2 and S3 at Amazon. And everything security was around that. It was super simple. Then, posture management came in, which was, I guess, the first cloud security thing ever, virtual firewalls. And now I think this is the era, more than anything else, we've been saying is that for a while, that cloud security is literally cybersecurity in the cloud. It's everything. And that's why this industry and the problem space, let's call it, for a lot of people, and this is why we are here, is overwhelming. We used to be, and you look like you're 14, 15 years old, so you've been in this industry for like at least 6 months. There's we've seen, we used to be able to actually have an expertise in an area. Well, so one guy was patch management, one guy was endpoint, someone managed the firewall. When someone tells me, hey, I'm in cloud security, I said, okay, what does that mean? Because that's like literally everything. It's cybersecurity, it's everything. So I think it's overwhelming. So this is why we're sitting here. And at Checkpoint, as someone who's spending a lot of time, we have almost 400 people working day in, day out on cloud security, on trying to get to positive cloud security outcomes with our technology. We know how complex this thing is. And so thanks for joining us actually today, for taking a part in sharing with your journey. And I think the Zinnia story, by the way, where did the name Zinnia come from?
First of all, pleasure to be here. And the name Zinnia came from a wildflower that grows here in the Midwest, and specifically Topeka, Kansas, and keyword being grow, right? So we're certainly in growth mode, and hope to spring up like a bunch of Zinnia flower beds.
Okay, awesome. That's awesome. So obviously, the first thing that, because we're going to talk a lot about cloud security, but I think what would be really interesting is to understand a bit more about what Zinnia does, because it's not necessarily a lot of the people that are listening know the company. Maybe they know the flower. I doubt it, but maybe they know the company. There's so maybe a bit about Zinnia and the evolution of the company, and then we can talk about sort of what drove what drove the motion to the cloud from the get-go. And obviously, you've been around other organizations also, so feel free to throw in data and knowledge from other areas also. But let's talk a bit about Zinnia.
Certainly. So Zinnia was reimagined as from SC2, I believe early this year, late last year. We are a third-party administrator of life insurance contracts and annuities. So we are in the financial services, fintech, insurance space. We're not an insurer or a reinsurer, but we work on behalf of our customers and clients who are in the insurance industry and are selling products. Our value proposition really is a couple things. One, we can take a open block, closed block, and life insurance policies and do a lot of the back office work for them. So call center, processing, updating contract values, as well as really working with our customers in developing new life insurance products. So myself being a 42-year-old male, Midwest, non-smoker, what's the right policy to me? Really business to business right now, but as we are growing, we're really looking to make strides into the business to consumer model as well.
Interesting. So what part of the business acts like a SaaS company? Like what part is software, what part is, because you mentioned call center, it sounds also like product consulting, but you literally run a fintech company to a large extent.
Certainly, I hesitate to call ourselves a SaaS company right now, but I think that's certainly what we're aiming for. We want people to be on our platform, invest in our platform, help make our platform better. All the other things that we do, not to trivialize them for sure, but that is parts of the entire package you get when you come to Zinnia is back office, call center, and then yes, our SaaS offering.
Right. No, and I'm assuming, I think it's interesting, definitely in the world that we live in, I think sometimes even though I've been in IT for 30 years, forget how essential software is to so many businesses and the service that you get from a business. So I'm assuming, for you guys, your customers interact with software most of the time, right? Like that's what they see.
Certainly. So that is our bread and butter, right? So we have our platform, our intellectual property. They are consuming what we're doing on a day-to-day basis is making software.
Yeah. So what was the cloud migration like? Why was I know my answers for moving to the cloud, but I think depending when you started the motion to the cloud, there's different reasons at the beginning, and also what Gartner calls the plateau of enlightenment, right? That you get hit with maybe that wasn't the right reason to move in the first place, and maybe we will touch on the question that was asked. But how did the journey start? What was it like, hey, let's go all in one day, we move everything, by the end of whatever year, this and that, we want to be there? Was it slow? What drove it?
Like anything, it depends on who you ask and what position they were in at the time.
They have different versions.
But certainly, if you look at a bullet point list of all the benefits of going to the cloud, I think I could speak to probably all of them in elasticity, right? So we need to spin up more resources at a quicker amount of time that it would have taken us to deploy more hardware in our data center, deploy more VMs. Availability, right? So when we were concerned about disaster recovery, well, it was quite a bit easier for us to shift resources to the public cloud versus enter into a contract with another data center, and just all of the care and feeding into really what I think is, I hesitate to call it commodity because I think that trivializes it, but network, compute, storage, right? They're turning into commoditized resources that we don't necessarily need or want to be the experts on anymore. We just want to use, consume, and then turn off when not needed.
Yeah. So the initial move, it sounds like, was more the infrastructure side, right? Almost like how the cloud started, as infrastructure as a services type offering. That sounds like step number one. Did you guys, as you moved through the journey, started adopting more and more platform as a service stuff? Like, hey, yeah, I moved the machine to the cloud, but actually maybe I don't need a machine. Maybe I want a function or a container, and maybe I don't want a database at all. I'll just use the service provider's platform as a service database. Is that sort of how the journey went?
Initially, no. But as we started to realize the advantages of the database as a service is a really good example. Like, we were used to monolithic, hey, let's install our database provider on a VM and install the database, load the tables. Now we're realizing, well, now we can really reduce our maintenance efforts and time into utilizing some of those native cloud platforms.
Right. So you're today still half, you would call it, or partially lift and shift and part cloud native, as the term in the industry is, from an application infrastructure perspective?
I would like to get to more of a cloud native infrastructure, but it takes time, it takes skill sets, it takes disruption, and I think that third bullet point is probably the biggest one. Is it just really takes a disruption in thoughts, and then from a security standpoint, I see it as less surface area to expose, but it also introduces a whole set of new issues and problems that we're
for sure. Yeah, and I actually wanted to ask you that, because a lot of the times when people look at moving to the cloud, security obviously is a big topic, rightfully so to a large extent. And in your case, it's not even a question, hey, where's the crown jewels? Literally everything is one big crown jewel, right? Like, you deal with sensitive data. If you have a piece of data, it's sensitive, probably.
Very true. We just treat it all as sensitive, right?
Right. One big sensitive pool of data. Yeah, that's what I would think. So was security during that transition? I'm sure today, I would love to hear more. How was security? Was it the sort of traditional afterthought? Hey, we're moving. Hey, by the way, Saul, we moved. Congratulations. Now solve the problem? Or was it more, was it a mix? Or a maturity curve? How did that go?
It was certainly a mixed effort. I wouldn't call security an afterthought, but it was definitely, we were at the table and we were told to buckle up and let's get going, right? Yeah. So we didn't really have a option to say no. It was more of an option, hey, you got to get ready, let's do it.
Yeah, I think the option to say no in most businesses that I know it's gone. Yeah, definitely in the software business, it's just gone. The barbarians are at the gate, they're going. And it's like, I like what you said, buckle up.
Yeah.
Right.
And I like to say no. We don't say no anymore. We say no, comma, but, or let's try this instead.
Right. I used to give this presentation almost 10 years ago when we just started. I say we as security practitioners, we need to move to a no with a K. Is, hey, I want to know what you're trying to achieve so I can say yes and let you also know what the risks are so you can take a decision. And also to my team, I used to say, hey, it's no with a K. If you don't know what he's trying to achieve, if you don't know what the outcome of the business is, there's no way you're going to understand how to actually provide a security solution that allows you to achieve that outcome, and you're going to have friction day one. So no with a K is another version of that. Yeah.
TJ, I'm going to steal that. Sorry.
Boom, stolen. No, it's okay. Got it. Trademarked, 5 cents per usage, and we'll send you an invoice.
You got it. Consumption model.
Consumption model. Yeah, definitely. So is the mindset right now from an application development perspective cloud first? It's either like, give me a very good reason why it's not going to the cloud? Is that sort of the approach, or it's like 100% cloud? What's the mindset?
Certainly, you'd have to have a pretty good, solid use case to not deploy resources to the cloud and instead deploy on-prem.
Makes sense.
And a lot of that just goes back to the benefits of what I spoke before.
Right.
Elasticity, availability.
Yeah. I think, it's interesting. When I talk with the organizations, and definitely depends on time when they started the journey, a lot of the first journeys was infrastructure. And someone asked on the Q&A around, are people still moving, or there's because you start reading about some people backing off and going back. And 99% of the time it's cost. Because they came in, I remember, even you probably remember 10 years ago, 9 years ago, it was, hey, it's going to be cheaper in the cloud. Oh, no, it's not. I mean, why, and by the way, why would it be? By definition, you're outsourcing someone, or you're taking a piece of work that you are supposed to do, and a piece of finance that you were supposed to do, and someone else is now doing it. By definition, it's a managed service. It's going to be more expensive if you just do lift and shift, and definitely if you just look at infrastructure. So at the beginning, you probably run into that also. I see people that are like shocked when they get, as the infrastructure starts to grow and they see these big numbers, and they're surprised. But that's not really the advantage of the cloud. The advantage of the cloud is speed. That's the real advantage. If you're not able to leverage, and that's why I think also cloud native, like you said, is very important. If you can't innovate, if you can't move fast, then don't go to the cloud. If you want to be slow, it's cheaper to be slow on-prem. That's what I would say.
You gave me a lot to chew on there. And yeah, certainly we struggled with that as well in our initial lift and shift. And I like the term lift and shift, but I stress leadership to really think about what you're saying there and really take a step back and think, not your on-prem resources shouldn't always equal what you're deploying in the cloud, right? Like, really take a step back, think about what you're doing, take a look at your costs. There's also lots of partners out there that are willing and able to help you out with costs. I know this is, a security focused webinar, but, do your research. The defaults of, we call it the tyranny of defaults, right? So if you just start deploying resources in a public clouds, the defaults are likely going to cost you more than you really take a step back and say, hey, do I really need this amount of IOPS on this web server? Or do I really need 3 or 4 or 5 of these VMs? Can I get away with 2 scaled out or in different regions? So yeah, like a lot to chew on, but I agree it is a concern, but there are ways to mitigate that.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think the part of it, again, because you can move fast, because you can make choices much easier, it's also much easier to spend more. Let's just say that. That's just the reality. Let's talk a bit about your security team. As you guys continue this or mature this migration to the cloud, did the structure of the security team change? Did the skill set change? How did you tackle that? Because it's very, I can tell you also on our side as a security vendor, it's a totally different skill set to understand, and even scarier. Every 2 seconds, there's 500 new services that you need to learn. No, how did you guys tackle that problem when the data center started moving to the cloud?
Certainly adapted, right? So we didn't add any new FTEs or new employees or new resources at all. It was really just training, and a lot of the training and a lot of the research that you have to do is just learning what I call the architecture or the nomenclature of the words. Like a VM in AWS is now referred to as an EC2. So just starting from the top and understanding the differences in the technologies, that's what we did. And yeah, our team didn't grow. We just kind of learned to adapt. And
Interesting.
Yeah, certainly.
How do you keep up today? How do you keep up? How does the team keep up?
I hesitate to say we don't. No, we keep up. So we're getting deep into the weeds here, but a lot of it is, if I had to look back and think about really what I've learned over the past 4 or 5 years in this cloud migration journey, is don't assume that your tool sets on premise will be a one-to-one relationship in the cloud, because it just doesn't always work that way. And vice versa, the security tools in the cloud might not be applicable to on-prem. So really take a look at your tool sets, your partners. Don't get overwhelmed by the amount of alerts that you might start seeing based on best practices, and really try to prioritize those alerts based on your risk posture and profile.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. I think just like everything, actually today, when we work with customers like yourselves, we talk about the maturity model, right? Like you were just talking, you can't, because it's so complex. There's so much there. You can't just turn on everything and expect for it to be productive. There's just no way. You don't have the people, don't have the process. And security in the cloud is, trying to think, it's probably the first time that as security practitioners, we cannot almost fix anything. We need other people to fix stuff. We have to go back to DevOps, SREs, developers to fix stuff. What can you do? It's all code at the end. So the maturity model is a very important part of actually figuring out how to use tools, how to implement them, how to put the processes together. And so you're right, 100%. So speaking of that, you have a lot of developers, obviously, right? Like a big chunk.
Yeah.
You have a lot of developers.
I don't know the ratio to developers to security practitioners, but it's gotta be staggering.
Yeah. So with a lot, and clearly in the cloud, it was always true, but in the cloud more than anything else, I think the right way to look at this is that cloud, and let's call it the entire cloud revolution around DevOps, CI/CD, and all that stuff, really was all about helping developers develop faster and deploy faster. And that's sort of almost, as security practitioners, when you hear, okay, there's developers and now they can even run faster and they can get more, that's a scary proposition. How do you keep the balance between, how do you build even the framework together with your development teams and development leads or the DevOps team to make them part of this journey? I'm sure that it evolved over time, right? I'm sure. What have you learned throughout that journey?
I think the first takeaway is I really learned that developers typically always want to do the right thing. They want to do a good job and they want to do it securely. If you put up arbitrary roadblocks and prevent them from moving fast, they're either going to circumvent the controls or find another job where they can really showcase their skills and do well elsewhere. Now, I'm in no way, shape, or form saying, well, we shouldn't have controls or we shouldn't have stringent, flexible security controls. That's not true. A lot of it is just really taking a step back and taking a look at what's the risk you're trying to mitigate or eliminate, and then work backwards from there. So I don't have solid, concrete examples to give you, but I really think that the speed of which developers can spin up resources in the cloud, you just allow that, but maybe don't allow them to allow RDP access from the internet to their EC2 instance, or
Yeah.
you don't allow them to make S3 buckets without some sort of gating mechanism.
Right.
I think that goes a long way without having a security gating mechanism at each point of the SDLC process or each point of building the application. Really taking a step back and saying, well, here's your development, here's your test, your QA. Let's get this ironclad before you go to production, and then use your tools there and keep an eye on it.
Yeah, I think one of the things you mentioned that around the developer, if you bother him too much, he'll just this is a very strange. I don't know if there's developers watching this, but for us security people, this is a really interesting situation, right? Because between us people here, we know this, right? They own this. It's them. It's about, I like how the AWS built this around the builders, right? They are the builders. They are building. We're the protectors. They're the builders. So the business is the developer, and it's a very interesting, a very delicate balance around, interfering too much, being too intrusive. Every time there's a false positive, it's a whole show and drama. And oh, you told me to fix this, and it's not even true. And I wasted my time. Next time, don't even call me. I think the right approach, and it's very, very much in line, I think, with what we were saying, because I think that there's a bit of sarcasm in our space around, the developers, they just don't care. I agree with you. It's not true, right? I think that given an option to do the right thing, they'll do the right thing. Sometimes it's just the right thing is not that easy to do, and sometimes they don't even have awareness of what is the right thing, right? And they would like tools. But I think the challenge is that historically security tools, and I can tell you, like, again, we have a cloud native application protection platform that you guys are using, right? So when we started looking at the whole shift left world, and we try to understand how do we shift CNAPP left, how do we shift posture management, how do we shift workload protection left, because it makes perfect sense, because you want the developers to be involved. Also, by the way, if you stop it before it goes to the production, you're way better off than trying to reverse engineer and fix it as you go back. Then one of the things that you discover really fast is that, yes, developers want to do the right thing, but most security tools don't talk developer. They're security tools. And even if you're saying it's security tools, but they are in this, but we integrate into the CI/CD platform. Yeah, but you're still a security tool. For example, if you do a demo now for a security tool for developers, and the first thing that you show is a dashboard, you don't understand your audience. they don't care about your dashboard, right? They want to see where do you connect, do you work in their ID. So anyway, my bottom line was, and I'll tell you a story. I remember in Israel, when I grew up in Israel, everybody was pirating movies, right? At the time, you remember Emu, BitTorrent, I can't even remember the rest of the stuff. Napster, boom, right? So you know when it stopped? Not because it was illegal, but it was illegal. You know when it stopped? When VOD and Netflix became prevalent. It became easier to do the right thing. When it's easier to do the right thing, you choose the right thing. Even if it costs whatever, if there's a subscription. And I think us as security people, even that sheer concept of a guardrail, to me, it sounds annoying. To me, it sounds like a bumper on the road and I'm going to get electrified by something. And I think that's what you were saying earlier. We're supposed to find the ways to make it easy to do the right. Here's a paved road. Go on that paved road. As long as you stay on this, and by the way, I'm designing it because I know what you want to go, life is much easier. If you start putting stuff that developers just don't see the value and it doesn't speak their language, and you're telling them to fix stuff without understanding what you're trying to fix, that's a big issue, and that's a lot of friction. So you guys have liaisons in the development team. How did you structure the relationship sort of between DevOps and your team? Is there security champions in the dev team? Is there something that you can share with us around how do you build that bridge with dev?
Certainly, still trying to make those inroads and still doing silo by silo, really application team by application team. Mm-hmm. You're really focusing on cloud native workloads and single page applications, the new hot stuff that everyone's working on. We have a much I would say, more fruitful back and forth relationship because they are moving at a quicker speed. As we work with more and more teams that are developing more monolithic applications that aren't necessarily used to working within the constraints of the cloud and security controls within the cloud, that's where it takes a little more give and take of finding that champion on each team or finding that individual who is able to kind of bridge that gap. Security practitioners, obviously, we can't do everything. We can't know everything. So really leaning on individuals within those teams, I think is a really good approach, and it's working really well for us. And then, ancillary to that, like conferences, meetings, like, hey, once a month, let's review what our threats are. So going through threat modeling exercises, maybe picking a topic and doing a lunch and learn with the development community within our organization has really paid off.
Oh, you do that? That's awesome, actually.
Certainly.
That's a good idea. So you bring them into a room, talk about security topics, how you can, and it's interactive. You actually do hands-on stuff, or is it mostly knowledge sharing? How do?
A little bit of hands-on. Sometimes we'll. There was a 2 or 3 years ago where we put a honeypot in the public cloud and just opened it up to the internet and just said, let's take a look at the logs within 5 seconds of
this
instance online.
And that was kind of an eye-opener.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can totally see the oh shit moment. Okay, that's actually awesome. That's a good idea, by the way.
Yeah, it really highlights the importance of what we're doing. And at the end of every one of them, you just say, hey, thank you for being part of our security team. And that goes a really long way to kind of guide them to doing the right things. Another thing because a lot to unpack here, but you brought up the terminology of guardrails, and that is that's an AWS specific nomenclature. I don't know about the public clouds that they have anything similar to that. And while it's a technical term, it's also a really good kind of control mechanism to talk about, right? So guardrails, we want guardrails that make sense. And we also want to highlight, or I want to highlight the fact that they are, for the most part, immutable, right? So they're not a control where I have to keep care and feeding on. An example would be if I had a box on premise that's my network security appliance. Well, I've got to patch it, I've got to update it, I've got to maintain it, I've got to upgrade. Whereas a guardrail, it's I hate to say set and forget it, but it's there. Yeah. It's not going to fail. The only way it might be circumvented is if a security admin turns it off or modifies it, right? So really lean on those guardrails or just fundamental controls, whether they be detective or preventative. They're going to serve you very well.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And I think once you start talking about that, that's sort of the way that the cloud security ecosystem of tooling sort of matured, right? I mean, the first generation, the first thing, we were there also as Checkpoint, took the checkpoint checkpoint firewall gateway and make it cloud ready. Okay, how? Because what? It's still a data center. You still have an ingress point. People are still going to go after you, just like you did with the honeypot. So okay, let's put the checkpoint. Then, to your point, the first thing was guardrails or detective, mostly to a large extent, and that's what you guys are using also together with us. Detective tools around saying, let's understand, this is what good should look like. How are we deviating from good, right? That's theoretically the idea. And I think there was an evolution also there. And you mentioned that, right? Like generation 1 was a lot about, just tell me everything. Generation 2 is, please don't tell me everything. I don't know what to do with everything. Just how about you just tell me what really matters? How about you just prioritize this stuff for me? And if there's a machine here that's connected to the outside world and it has permissions to access a database that has sensitive data, I care about that way more than some whatever machine that's not connected to anything and does nothing, right? And so I think that was sort of to your point, like the second detective, but detective on smart detective, let's call it. it's really interesting the way, and then detection and response, right? Sort of how do I do, what does a cloud IDS, intrusion detection system, or intrusion prevention system look like? Which is very different. To your point, your tools are not going to work. Like your previous tools, take your Checkpoint, one of the biggest players in IPS, it does some stuff in the cloud. There's stuff it just cannot do, the traditional one. So we have our cloud CDR platform. So I think that evolution is something that, and then when you talk about the guardrails piece, that was sort of a lot of the first generation things that but without it, you're toast. That's why I say to people all the time, listen, it doesn't matter. In Checkpoint, we're a prevention company. No cloud detection or response or firewall or whatever is going to help you if you have crap configuration, if you leave secret in code, if someone leaves the password in code, if you have a vulnerable machine that's exposed to the internet and the port is open, nothing's going to help you. You're toast. So you have to take care of and that's the challenge because it moves so fast and it changes so fast. So you guys on the, how did you solve or how are you looking to solve? And this is one last question around sort of how you operate today. And then I would love to ask you what's big on your agenda for tomorrow. But let me rephrase the question. The biggest challenge when I talk with customers is, hey, listen, I find a problem. And let's say I found a really big problem, an important problem. Now I need to go back to a lot of times to the DevOps teams or to the SRE team or to the developer and fix it. Have you guys figured out sort of what is the best practice and how to accelerate remediation of problems? Misconfigurations, over permissions. You have a great system now. You're using Checkpoint. It finds a lot of stuff. It finds good stuff, prioritize stuff now also. But still, you depend on others to fix some of this stuff. Do you have any tips for people listening on sort of, except hugging a developer, which you said? I totally agree, hug a developer.
Short of hugging developers, no. The key word that you said numerous times is prioritizing. Really taking a look at the meat of the alerts and what it's trying to tell you. I would say that in a traditional lift and shift, you're going to start off with, not to trivialize EBS encryption, but you're going to see a lot of volumes that are unencrypted or items that are not encrypted. While those important, maybe they don't rise to the level in a dev environment that a open RDP port exposed to the internet via, or SSH would pose us. So really focusing on, don't focus on the low-hanging fruit so much because they are easier to fix, but really focus on the criticality of the alerts and then how it's going to impact your organization. As far as bridging the gap between the developers, so let's say we do have an alert that, hey, this is an instance open to the internet, that use your best judgment. One, like, hey, we need to stop this right away. And if it's that scenario, you're almost assuming breach at that point, right? But take a step back before you start lifting and shifting and really have a controlled environment of this asset belongs to this team or this account. Let's multi-account structure, right? If it's a resource that's designated to this application, it needs to be within this account or it needs to be tagged appropriately. That way we know what the workflow is and we know who to contact. And if we don't know who to contact, we know who we're going to make mad or angry if we just start shutting things off, right?
Right. That's actually very good. The way that you, in like 1 minute, summarize is a lot of the stuff that we've been busy with in the last 12 months from a product roadmap perspective. And also, it's a big chunk of what we're focusing at for the next 6 to 12 months. Just to align it with what you said, one is we just talked about it, prioritization. Huge topic for us over the last 12 months. We introduced this thing that we call effective risk management. It basically takes 1,000 alerts and tries to find the 10 that actually matter in order, by definition, knowing the context of the other. Second piece was a lot around what you just talked about. How do I find the right person? So we're working, that's a big chunk of what you're going to see from us in the next few months around, okay, I got it, I know it. Which one is important? Okay, great. Who do I go to? And what's the impact of a fix? All these questions that you go through a process very, very important, huge bottleneck for most practitioners like yourself is that piece like you just talked about. So that's a lot of stuff that we're working on, because I think that's really where the rubber meets the road. Like I said, that's why almost generation one was what we talked about. The next generations have to solve to these problems of prioritization and remediation. And yeah, I need more context in order to do the right security decisions. I need context. Don't just tell me this EC2 machine has, it doesn't happen. Give me the full context. Tell me, like, focus now on the security decisions that actually matter, and then shortcut my time to remediation or to take action, right? That's literally our roadmap. That's how we look at this problem. And you just mentioned how you prioritize it. So when you look, because we covered a lot of stuff, and we can talk about this for like 3 more hours. And I want to leave some time for questions. I know there's some questions, so I want us to sort of go to them. But when you look, Saul, on you're using Checkpoint for a lot of the stuff, which is great. We appreciate you. And there's other stuff. When you look at the next big challenges for you, when it comes to this big word, cloud security, what are the biggest 2-3 projects, or let's say even one project? One important thing you want to solve to be, if there's something beyond the stuff we actually sort of covered? Is it more shifting left, building the bridges? Is it different types of attack detection? I don't know. What's big on your agenda?
So starting off with shifting left, right? Moving from, traditional monolithic workloads to containers, really skilling up on how do we secure those, right? Like, I understand the basic premises of them, but I'm not, an ECS expert. I'm not an expert in Kubernetes, but how do we take our security controls and align them to what those might
translate
look like?
them. Yeah.
Having a tool that does both of them and all of that really helps. Second thing is, and this might be unique to our company, but I don't think so. I bet a lot of the people on this webinar can relate to this, is M&A, mergers and acquisitions. So we've been heavily involved in that in the past 1 to 2 years. And, hey, now you have a brand new cloud infrastructure you don't have access to. Let's connect them because we want to integrate as one company. Yeah,
congratulations.
So that's why I don't have any hair, right? So
it's a tough one.
That's a tough one, but again, if you use, if you have a partner that has a flexible, rigid tool set that allows you to start ingesting that data from day one, you have a much clearer picture. Third, I don't want to talk about AI, so let's just not talk about AI.
Yeah, it's actually an important topic, to be honest. I think, I think the way that probably you're thinking about it is, how do I use AI to make my job easier, to automate stuff, to find out stuff before? There's a lot of focus, sort of, because it's a cool topic to talk about how attackers use AI. I think the way cooler topic is how we, for example, as a tool developer, and how you as a practitioner can use AI to just do stuff you just can't do without it, because you don't have the manpower, you don't have the decision process. I think that's really where the interesting piece comes in. But it is like it became such an abused term in 6 months. It's painful almost.
I said I wasn't going to talk about it. You grabbed the ball and ran with
it. I did it. If it was last year, we would talk about crypto or Bitcoin or something like that. We see what happens. So if you look at so for the people that are on the journey, you mentioned actually throughout a couple of very important sort of notes to people to take. But if you'd say, give tips, like something to go home with and say to my whatever significant other, hey, I listened to a webinar today. There was this lead information security officer who was sitting there. He actually said, if you do one thing or 2 things, keep these in mind. Do you have anything like to share with the audience before you had hair and after you lost all the hair? Any tip
in the middle, certainly. I touched on this briefly before, but really just don't assume that your current security program and controls can seamlessly shift to the cloud. Really focus on the benefits of going to the cloud, and don't try to mitigate or stop those benefits, right? Like the key benefit is speed. Don't slow it down. Do know with a K, as like you say.
No with a K.
Find a partner to really take a look at the tool sets. There was a question, in the Q&A about what are the native controls that public clouds offer, which are great, but I really think that the partners are always talking to the public cloud. Like AWS has a really good relationship with the majority of the security partners, right? So they're always discussing what's coming up, what's new. And I don't think that the partners, like the tools, are going to run out of things. I don't think that the native tools that are protecting workloads are ever going to outpace what Checkpoint or other security vendors are going to offer. They're always going to have a front row seat to what's new, and they're going to develop faster and be able to secure things better and more efficiently.
Actually, I would add to that, and these are great tips, by the way. I love the first one specifically. I think that I would add to the native tools. It really depends which native tools you refer to when you ask whoever asked the question, right? There's native tools which we look at them, for example, I can tell you as a platform provider, as building blocks. And we say, great, hey, Macy is good. You use Macy, you like Macy? How about we take Macy's input and put it as part of the context for prioritizing stuff, right? If Macy can tell me there's sensitive information there, by the way, I'm just now ruined the release that we're doing in a week from now. But if Macy said there's sensitive information here and there's a machine that's accessing that information, yeah, that's more important as a prioritization than others. So I think that there's a lot of that, and for us, when we look at our solution, I think we should be leveraging that. If again, Inspector 2.0 comes out and you actually turn it on, great, we should be using that. Guard Duty should enrich what we're doing in cloud detection and response anyway, if you are able to turn it on. So I think that there's 1 + 1 = 3 to a large extent in a lot of these things. And you're right, we're super close with the cloud, with the hyperscalers to understand where they're going and make sure that things are working. There's a lot of there's a lot of confusion in this space, I would say, around, because there's so many players and so many terms, and the problem is complex. And so I think part of what you're doing, obviously, and part of what you mentioned that with your team, and I think for the audience here, stay aware, right? Stay aware, understand, learn, and it can be overwhelming, but there's you just have to go and dig. You have to dig because otherwise you're going to get confused very fast. And the last point I would say, just to add, you mentioned the platform, right? In the cloud, best of breed is a platform.
You got it. You got it.
You're toast if you're going best of breed. You're just toast. You're going to replicate 30 years of cybersecurity that failed, in the sense of, oh my God, I have this. This is really great. This is really great. This is really great. Container security, this security. You're going to be so lost. Best of breed is a platform. So anyway, we're happy that we're there together with you in the journey. Hey, Jonathan, I think there was a few questions. So.
There are a few questions. I just want to say just one question about the cloud vendor security. And you mentioned a 3-letter acronym before M&A. So, and if you're dependent on a cloud vendor security solution, and then suddenly you have to do the same thing in another cloud, you're toast again. So that's another concern. So let's quickly, if you don't mind, I have a few slides just before we go into, and I actually have a final poll that I want to share. And then I have a couple of calls to action, and we'll go into Q&A. So the question, which is I've been asked to add here, is how can we follow up with you after the webinar? I'm not talking about you, Saul. I'm talking about the people that are watching. So answer number 1 is please ask my Checkpoint account team or channel partner to contact me. Answer 2, I'd love to schedule a demo of Checkpoint's capabilities. Answer 3, which is something that we've been emphasizing since the beginning of this year, and it's working really well. Let's work together to plan a personalized cloud security workshop for my team. So we'll reach out to you. We'll talk to you, people on the call. Tell us what you're interested in. Tell us what's making you nervous. Tell us, and we'll put together 2-hour, 4-hour, full day workshop. We'll do some assessments with you. We'd be happy to understand that for you because, of course, the better we understand your concerns, the better we can help you and work together with you about that. Answer number 4, please contact me about something else not included above. And answer number 5, this is an interesting one. If you are interested in telling your cloud migration story in our next webinar, please, ping, make a note of that, vote on that. We'll reach out to you. We'll chat with you. It's a great opportunity for you to share your lessons learned, your painful stories, the stuff that takes your hair off. Share that with your peers. I'm sure that everyone will be very happy and interested to hear. And maybe TJ or somebody else from one of our cloud security experts will be very happy to interview you. So be very happy to get those votes back from you. If there's anything that you'd like to share with us, I'll keep the poll open for another couple of seconds. Just a few calls to actions and next steps. Again, we have this great total economic impact study that was done by Forrester with a customer, a large healthcare customer, talking about the value, the financial value of using CloudGuard. Most of the time we'll talk about what the security value is because we're Checkpoint and we lead with security. But there was, the study was done and showed that there's actual financial benefit to that. So you can download that from the attachments below. I mentioned also getting a demo. We have a QR code here. We'll send you the slides later, and you can actually watch this webinar afterwards, the recording of the webinar, and you can scan that. And you can get that from the attachments below as well. We'll reach out and do a customized demo for you. And as I mentioned before, you can plan a personalized workshop, 2 hours, 4 hours, full day. You tell us what you're interested in, and we'll be happy to help you out. Also from the attachments below. Let's quickly go into the Q&A. So the first question was to Zinnia, to Saul. Did you guys consider the security tools and the controls provided by the hyperscaler in your case? It's AWS. And I'm guessing that you probably did, and you probably used some of them.
And I think Saul answered that, yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Certainly kind of started out with native controls as we kind of learned what was out there and with our partners. And then, like TJ said, everything is it's a symbiotic relationship. The tools that are offered natively really coexist well with any solution that you pick from a third party.
Got it. So the questions, there were a couple of questions from one person that added a bunch of other questions. The first question was, is the majority of the industry still moving to the cloud? I've read from many CIOs that they have had to cancel on-premise to cloud moves, and in some cases move back from cloud to on-prem due to the continual rising cost of cloud resources. So we spoke about this a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Like I mentioned, I'll be very brief. And again, Saul can add. I think people who did pure lift and shift and never went off lift and shift are going to struggle more because it's going to be a lot of cost with less benefit on the other side. So there's going to be more struggle there. Once you go native, I'm sure there's examples of going back to on-prem, but I just don't see how that happens. The speed is just, I don't, Saul, you've probably been to reInvent a couple of times or reinforce. You sit there in a room and there's 50,000 people that if you take them outside AWS, they don't know what to do. What will they do the day after? So I don't know how you go back. Once you go there, I don't know if there's a way back cloud native.
I'll shift the onus of the question around here. Is companies that are starting up, like new startup companies or even new larger enterprises, hey, let's start a company. Let's build a data center. No, that's not happening. So. That's not happening at all.
That's a very good way to look at it, actually. You're right. Yeah.
So the follow-on question was that this person has said that we run a very big physical production environment with some proprietary systems that are on-prem, and their vendors recommend not exposing these systems to the internet or the cloud. For management teams that are not as familiar with these types of environments, how do you address it when they are saying everything is going to the cloud?
So hosted solutions that the vendor is saying do not connect to the
internet.
Yeah, I'll just say this. If you have the right control, like Saul mentioned, if you have the right guardrails, if you have the right checks, and you can, by the way, as easy as on-prem to say it's not connected to the cloud. If it's not connected to the internet, if it's not connected to the internet, it's as secure in the cloud as it is secure anywhere else. And we work with customers that have used the cloud as literally as a data center, but they still use the hub and spoke model. So the cloud itself, the cloud presence is not connected to the internet, except let's say if they use Azure through an express route to their central location, and they just use the cloud as an elastic data center. But nothing goes out to the outside world, it all goes through the hub, which is on-prem. That's a way to look at this. If you have some of the stuff like that and you still want to enjoy and it a lot of the time goes through a checkpoint firewall, right? If you want to go and enjoy the flexibility of infrastructure, but if it's not connected to the internet, it's not connected to the internet. It's it's the same security level. I think to a large extent, that's
I agree with that.
What do you think, so? Yeah.
I agree with that. The key word there is flexibility, customization. You can do nearly everything other than run Spark systems in the cloud, right? So as long as it's Windows, Linux, you can define the network topology however you want. It can, even if it's in the cloud, you don't need internet access. You can put it in its own little private bubble and move on with life.
Exactly.
And so this last question is very relevant to that. So as a network engineer, I like on-premise firewalls. I'm currently managing a group of, I know that you have on-premise as well. I know that very well. And our management team is pushing for cloud-hosted solutions. But Gartner has stated that cloud-hosted security solutions don't provide as good security for north-south traffic, but do east-west very well, which is very relevant to what TJ just mentioned for putting your checkpoint, network security, cloud network security on the ingress egress from your cloud into your on-prem.
And not all solutions are created equal, just that we're set. Actually, Gartner just released a cloud network security capability matrix, right? And not all cloud firewalls are the same. Let's go just like that. So check the Gartner report. But whoever asked the question is using Checkpoint already. You're in a good place. Just turn it on in the cloud.
I'd agree with that. You can shift your on-premise firewalls to a virtual appliance. I know there's a lot of other functionality that is coming down the road for north-south traffic, but I can say, without a shadow of doubt, I've not struggled with that. I do think that the statement that east-west very well, you can really utilize security groups and kind of how they operate with an implicit deny, just like a firewall. You can also get the flexibility of doing a lot of like hub and spoke VPC inspection. You can route all your traffic to an inspection VPC if you want. So there's quite a bit of options that you don't need to change your entire topology of your network on premise to help with accomplishing that in the cloud.
And you can actually deploy auto-scaling gateways into that inspection VPC, and you can have everything that's going east-west not go direct, but go via deep inspection, traffic inspection by the checkpoint solution that you mentioned that you like on-prem. So that works exactly the same way. So, gentlemen, we're running out of time, and we're also running out of questions. And I also respect your time and everybody else on the call. Closing comments, TJ.
Well, I think we said it all, and we're really running out of time. But thank you very much. So it's been a pleasure, and looking forward to continuing this journey together. So there's still a lot of journey left.
Certainly, and if anyone in the audience has any follow-up questions, I'm real easy to find on LinkedIn. So feel free to connect, hit me up, and we can chat further.
That's awesome.
Excellent. So thank you so much. Appreciate the partnership. TJ, thank you, and thank you everybody on the call, on the webinar, for joining. It wouldn't be very much fun if we were going to be doing these webinars with nobody there. So we appreciate you listening. We hope it was valuable, and please contact us if you have any questions or requests for content in the future. We'd be happy to hear. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.